With the Halo community now in shattered ruins following the Great Halo Schism between Bungie and Microsoft, it was now up to 343 Industries to help pick up the pieces and rebuild, dealing with the aftermath head on. But they would soon learn that they were about to fight an impossible battle, a battle that could never be truly won. Hey guys, it's the Tyrant here, and today we're continuing our journey through the rise and fall of Halo. When we left off last time, Bungie and Microsoft had officially gone their separate ways, and the members of the Halo community weren't sure who to follow. Do they stick with Bungie and support their next project, hoping it would be bigger and better than Halo? Or do they follow Halo, since for many of them, it's how they found Bungie to begin with? 343 began reaching out to community leaders from across the board, myself included, as they showcased their very first game since taking charge. A game they thought would help soften the blow and make the community feel more at home, and dubbed it a gift to the fans. Of course, I'm talking about Halo Anniversary, a game created to celebrate 10 years of Halo. This was a game every Halo fan was looking forward to, and the idea behind it was certainly a good one. The concept was to take the original game and leave everything unchanged except for one thing: the graphics. At this point, Halo was 10 years old, and 343 wanted to give it a good buff and shine, making it look like an Xbox 360 game while still feeling like the original. Online co-op would be added, something the original game never had, and there would even be skulls and terminals for players to find. To sweeten the deal even further, classic maps would be remade and playable for Halo Reach. Sounds great, right? But was it? The game was released and immediately met with mixed reviews. Now, I will give serious credit to the graphical updates that were given to their environments. Simply put, they looked amazing. The dynamic lighting had been improved, and even the soundtrack had received an upgrade, which could be toggled on and off anytime the player wished. But the overall execution was still a bit off. The people and aliens hadn't really received any major updates at all, but rather were taken from previous Halo titles, mainly Halo 3 and Halo Reach. It's because of this that the cutscenes with either Captain Keyes or Cortana always felt a bit off, like they really didn't belong there.
But I've isolated approach signatures for multiple CCS-class battle groups. Make it 3 capital ships per group. And in about 90 seconds, they'll be all over us.
Well, that's it then. Bring the ship back up to Combat Alert Alpha. I want everyone at their stations.
Everyone, sir?
Everyone. And Cortana. Let's give our old friends a warm welcome.
I've already begun.
And the elite Zealots? Up until Halo Reach, Zealots were always thought to be gold in color. However, in Halo Reach, Zealots were made a completely different subclass entirely. The gold ones were now referred to as Generals. Halo Anniversary, however, made the mistake of porting over what Halo Reach made out to be Zealots, so there were no gold elites in Halo Anniversary, at least not with the updated graphics switched on. And while the soundtrack was indeed beautiful, more often than not the volume was cranked up so loud you could barely hear the character dialogue. It's hard to say for sure exactly how something like that could be glossed over when it seems like it's a pretty basic skill even for most known YouTubers. And the co-op? While it was certainly a good idea in theory, the lag in each game was unbearable. Even with a high-speed internet connection, just being able to complete a mission with someone else was almost near impossible. And while previous Halo games weren't always necessarily perfect in that field, they were still generally more stable. So all in all, the idea was there, and sure, maybe it's the thought that counts, but overall the execution could have been much better. Alright, so the first game was a swing and a miss, but luckily 343 had the chance to redeem themselves with their very first Halo title built entirely by them from the ground up. In 2012, we saw the release of Halo 4, and if 343 had one major component on their side for this game, it was the build-up. We'd be back in the boots of the Master Chief for the first time since the end of Halo 3, and I can guarantee you that there wasn't a single person who saw Halo 3's legendary ending and didn't want to know what happens next. This was 343's chance to show the community what they could really do. Prior to the game's release, all we really knew was that the events of Halo 4 were set to take place directly after the legendary events of Halo 3. We knew we'd be landing on a mysterious Forerunner shield world, and that we'd be encountering a brand new race of creatures. This would be the first time since Halo Combat Evolved that we'd been introduced to an entirely new faction of enemies. Then the game was released in November of 2012, 2 years after Halo Reach and a year sooner than most major Halo titles, which was typically about 3 years. We were all so excited to be playing the Master Chief again, and 343 made it clear from the get-go that they'd be doing everything they could to legitimately make you feel like you were in the Mark VI armor. And on that aspect of the game, they delivered. You actually felt like you were the Master Chief, even though this also included the questionable QuickTime events. And it helped that the graphics for Halo 4 were so out of this world. Combined with the physics engine, this may very well be the most realistic looking Halo we have ever seen to date. And while some folks had mixed feelings about this, especially with the grunts now looking and even sounding like miniature mountain trolls from Lord of the Rings, the attention to detail was most definitely impressive. Even the soundtrack was amazing. I mean, sure, it wasn't Marty O'Donnell, but it still had such epic tone, and it matched every game scenario perfectly. This was a game where, in many ways, 343 tried to play it safe. And while they did take some obvious risks, we'll get to those in a bit. But the first thing that needs to be pointed out is the Covenant. Since in the past, aliens like the Brutes, the drones, the skirmishers, and the engineers had received mixed reviews from fans, 343 decided to approach the issue with a classic touch by only including the original 4 species we encountered in Halo Combat Evolved. And given how the Covenant were actually presented in the game, I think it's pretty safe to say that they made the right call. And with them came the return of the classic weapons palette. We saw the return of both the Covenant Carbine and the beam rifle for the Covenant side, and we saw both the battle rifle and the DMR for the humans. In fact, the only real dramatic change we saw with the classic weapons was trading out the plasma rifle for the new storm rifle, even though it served pretty much the same general functionality. The vehicles were also kept mostly classic, with the Covenant having the Ghost, the Wraith, and the Banshee, while the humans had the Warthog, the Scorpion tank, and the brand new mech vehicle called the Mantis. And yes, I love that thing. And while armor abilities were still carried over from Halo Reach, at least this time around they didn't feel shoehorned into the game, and they felt more useful in general. Even the story itself was fairly solid. It grabbed your attention right from the get-go with the situation happening on the Forward unto Dawn, then suddenly getting tractor beamed into the Forerunner shield world. And if that ending didn't make you shed a tear, you aren't even human.
Wait. Welcome home, John.
That stuff was all well and good and made the game entertaining and memorable. But then there were the risks. The biggest risk here was the introduction of the Prometheans, a race of semi-sentient robots that were put in place to guard the shield world Requiem. And while there were only 3 distinct types, and they all worked really well together, none of them were really fun to fight. The masses of crawlers usually just took the place of drones when it came to just mainly slowing the game down. They weren't fun so much as they were annoying. And the knights? Don't even get me started there. We're talking about hulking enemies with shields, can't be headshotted due to their face armor, can use nearly any Promethean weapon including the power weapons, and have a vast array of magical abilities that further give them the advantage on the battlefield. I mean, sure, maybe as bosses they could have worked, but they were everywhere in the game. Believe it or not, the most interesting Promethean enemy to me was the Watcher. I mean, sure, they were annoying, but take away their ability to spawn in crawlers, defend other Prometheans with an energy shield, and, resurrect down allies. Okay, that's an oddball. Basically, they serve the purpose I always thought the drones were supposed to have. And as far as the multiplayer goes, it doesn't help that most of the maps felt completely uninspiring, but with the return of loadouts, ordnance drops, and armor abilities, it didn't help that we now had a third faction of weapons on the table. I mean, they weren't really anything overly new or exciting as much as they were just a different flavor of the same concept. Add in the concept of sprint now being a standard feature for every player, and suddenly Halo starts feeling less like Halo. It's no wonder we saw MLG drop Halo from their competitive gameplay. But the big takeaway from this goes back to something I've echoed repeatedly throughout this series. The worst thing you can do to a Halo game is start taking good features away. Halo 4 didn't just do that to one feature either, it did it to several. Co-op was reduced from 4 players down to 2, theater mode was completely botched from campaign, and Firefight was dropped in favor of the new episodic Spartan Ops campaign. And don't get me wrong, while Spartan Ops in and of itself was entertaining in the sense that it felt like firefight with objectives, having the option to customize your own firefight experience should have been there too, just like it was in the two previous games. Halo 4 is a game I typically refer to as a missed opportunity. They were on the right track in so many ways, but the delivery ultimately fell short of the expectation of longtime Halo fans. Don't get me wrong, the game was definitely fun, but it still wasn't great, and it makes me wonder if they really should have just taken that extra year to give it a better polish and make it more up to the standards of the Halo community. Even members of my own community, some who had been with us for years, were so disappointed by the overall delivery of Halo 4, they didn't even bother purchasing an Xbox One to play future Halo games with. That should tell you something. But still, Microsoft continued to push forward, determined to stick to their goal of releasing a new Halo game every year. Next, they decided to home in on mobile devices and release the two games Halo Spartan Assault and Halo Spartan Strike. Now, for the record, these games were released 2 years apart from each other, but the premise is still basically the same. The player would have a top-down scenario of the battlefield and would basically stick control their way through 30 missions, usually about 5 minutes long, to achieve victory. Now, I want to be clear here and note that both of these games are a lot of fun to play and are certainly some of the best games you can get for your mobile device. Both campaigns are each roughly 2.5 to 3 hours long and feature amazing graphics and soundtracks. And this would all be fine and dandy if Halo was actually in the mobile business, but for most Halo fans, myself included, these were seen as side projects at best. Filler content between games, if you will. So many fans didn't take the game seriously, despite them being well worth their $5 price tags. These games seem like an afterthought and a way for players to stay busy and spend more money up until the release of the next major Halo title. It personally took me over 3 years before I finally decided to give Spartan Assault the full Tyrant try, and again, even though I loved it, the fact that even a dedicated Halo fan like myself just couldn't muster up the interest to play it when it was first released definitely says something, and a lot of people felt that way. Microsoft was beginning to run out of runway at this point, so they decided to give the anniversary concept another go and released Halo the Master Chief Collection. Their plan was to bring almost every major Halo title over to the Xbox One, put most of its focus on a Halo 2 anniversary, which would be included in the bundle, and even add in the game's very own multiplayer. It was pretty much clear right out of the box that they'd learned from at least some of their mistakes from Halo Anniversary, and by that I mean they actually started creating their own new models for its Halo 2 equivalent, rather than stealing them from other Halo titles. And the pre-rendered cutscenes created by Blur were beyond epic, almost to the point of setting a completely new standard for Halo in general. But for all that, the final product was still a commercial failure for Microsoft, with most of its issues revolving around the multiplayer experience. Playing it was nearly impossible, with most players having to wait in in-game lobbies for extreme periods of time before finally finding a game, and some players never even got to play at all. Now eventually most of these issues were fixed, and we even received a Halo 3 ODST add-on for it, but by then the damage was done. Players were already turned off by the initial experience and were seeking entertainment elsewhere, with many of them turning to Bungie's brand new sci-fi shooter experience, Destiny. It's no wonder we won't be seeing a Halo 3 anniversary. And for more information on that statement, I'll post links in the description below. The odds were now stacked against Microsoft. They were trying so hard to kick Halo into high gear that they forgot that quantity isn't always better than quality. And that's really where Bungie games differed when you stop and think about it. I mean, sure, there was a 3-year waiting period between games, but when the game was finally released, you felt that that's really all you needed. It was 3 years well spent. So much care and attention went into each and every one of their titles that we didn't need filler games to keep us busy until the next game was released. The game we had in front of us was already well more than good enough to keep us busy for years at a time. Now it feels more like Halo's been put on an assembly line, and that's not the way it should be. It's not that 343 doesn't care about Halo or their fans. They clearly do, and I can see it from everything they've done, and they're trying to do what's in the best interest of the fans, or at least what they think is in their best interest, but they're also stuck between a rock and a hard place. Halo isn't the only player on the table anymore, and with the demands of constant releases and deadlines from their parent company Microsoft, as well as having to confront an army of Halo fans who believe 343 will never live up to Bungie, the company is in a gridlock, a standstill. How do you find a solution to a seemingly unsolvable problem? And that's exactly what problem we're going to be solving in my next video, Halo the Rise and Fall Part 7. the finale to the Rise and Fall series, where we'll be talking about Halo 5 Guardians, the current state of the Halo franchise, and where it needs to go with Halo 6 and beyond. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I want to hear from you what your favorite 343 Halo title is, or what your least favorite is, and most importantly, why. You can let me know in the comments below, or you can let me know on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, if you have any comments or questions for me personally, Twitter is definitely the best place for you to reach me, so I hope to see you there. And if you like this video, please share it with your friends so we can get this conversation going and use it to help better our Halo experiences in the future. And don't forget to click that subscribe button for more video game related content every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right here on MythicTyrant.com. I hope you guys are really enjoying this series so far, and I'll see you right back here next time for the series finale of Halo: The Rise and Fall. Thanks so much for watching, guys and gals, and as always, I'm the Tyrant, signing off.